I, 28F, have a younger brother named Leo. He was the center of our family's universe, especially my mother's. I always understood. He was charming and funny, the kind of person who could light up a room just by walking into it. I was the quieter, more serious one, the responsible one. When Leo got sick, that dynamic didn't change. It just got sharper, more defined. The diagnosis was renal failure. His kidneys were shutting down, and the doctors said it was aggressive. The word they used was transplant. It hung in the air of every room, a heavy, suffocating cloud. My mother, Elena, fell apart in the most theatrical way possible. Her grief was a performance, loud and public. She would hold court in the hospital waiting room, recounting every detail of Leo's latest blood test to anyone who would listen. My father, Robert, just faded into the background. He wrung his hands, his face a permanent mask of worried helplessness. He hovered around my mother, fetching her tea, patting her shoulder, and murmuring empty comforts. It was my job to be practical. I spoke with the doctors, I researched treatment options, and I was the first one to raise my hand to get tested as a potential donor. It was never a question. He was my brother. You do anything for your brother. I went through the initial screenings, the blood draws, the endless vials they took from my arm. The nurses were kind but clinical. They told me the first step was a simple compatibility test. If that showed promise, we would move on to more complex evaluations. The wait was agonizing. Every phone call made my heart leap into my throat. I tried to keep myself busy with work, but my focus was gone. My mind was always at the hospital, in that sterile room with Leo, who was growing paler and weaker by the day. My mother called me constantly, not to see how I was, but to give me updates that were really just long, rambling monologues about her own suffering. I haven't slept in 3 days, Maya, she would say, her voice thick with manufactured drama. I just sit here and watch him. Your father is useless, you know. He just sits there reading the newspaper. How can he read the newspaper at a time like this? I would murmur something supportive, tell her to try and get some rest, and hang up feeling drained and oddly angry. Her pain seemed to be more about her than about Leo. I visited Leo whenever I could. He would try to smile, but his eyes were tired. Stop worrying so much, May, he whispered once, his voice raspy. You're going to get wrinkles. I forced a laugh and squeezed his hand. You just focus on getting better, I told him. I'll handle the wrinkles. But seeing him tethered to machines, his skin tinged with a sickly yellow, made it hard to breathe. This was real. This was happening. And the only thing that mattered was finding a way to fix it. I pinned all my hopes on that compatibility test. I prayed I would be a match. I had to be. The call came on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't the transplant coordinator, which was the first strange thing. It was the head nephrologist's office, Dr. Eris. His assistant asked if I could come in that afternoon. She said the doctor wanted to speak with me in person. A cold dread washed over me. Why in person? If it was good news, they would just tell you over the phone, right? They'd say, congratulations. You're a match. Let's schedule the next steps. This felt different. This felt wrong. I tried to ask the assistant what it was about, but she was politely evasive. The doctor prefers to discuss the results directly with you, was all she would say. I spent the next few hours in a fog of anxiety. I called my best friend, Chloe, 28F, and told her about the appointment. Maybe it's just protocol, Maya, she said, trying to be reassuring. Maybe it's so they can explain the whole surgical process to you in detail. Don't panic yet. I wanted to believe her, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. I drove to the hospital with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I walked through the familiar, antiseptic-smelling corridors to the renal ward. Dr. Eris's office was at the end of a quiet hall. He greeted me with a somber expression that did nothing to ease my fears. Dr. Eris was a man who didn't waste words. He was direct, which I usually appreciated, but today his directness felt like a threat. He motioned for me to sit down. He sat opposite me, a file on the desk between us. He didn't open it. He just folded his hands on top of it and looked at me. His eyes were full of a kind of professional pity that made my skin crawl. "Thank you for coming in, Maya," he started. His voice was low and even. "We received the results from your compatibility screening." I held my breath. I braced myself for the words, "You're not a match." I had prepared for that disappointment. I had run that scenario through my head 100 times. I would be devastated, but we would move on. We would look for another donor. We would get Leo on the National Registry. It would be a setback, not a death sentence. "As we expected, you are not a compatible donor for your brother," he said. The words landed like small, hard stones. Disappointment washed over me, sharp and bitter. I felt a useless failure. I couldn't help him. I nodded, trying to process it, trying to shift gears to the next plan. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Okay, so what's next? The national list?" Dr. Aris held up a hand. "That's one part of it," he said slowly. "But there is something else. Something the DNA analysis brought to light. It's a delicate matter." My confusion must have shown on my face. A delicate matter? What could be more delicate than my brother dying? He took a deep breath before he continued. He looked me straight in the eye. "The genetic markers are definitive. You and Leo are not full siblings." The world tilted on its axis. I stared at him. Sure, I had misheard. "What?" I asked. "What does that mean?" "It means you share only one biological parent," he explained, his voice gentle but firm. "Based on the samples, we can confirm you both share the same mother, but you do not share the same father." He paused, letting the information sink in, but it wasn't sinking in. It was bouncing off the surface of my brain, a nonsensical string of words. Not full siblings. Same mother, different father. It was impossible. My parents had been married for 30 years. They were high school sweethearts. Our family wasn't perfect, but it was solid. It was real. "That's not possible," I said, shaking my head. "There must be a mistake. A mix-up in the lab. You have the wrong file." This was the only explanation that made sense. A clerical error, a simple human mistake. Dr. Aris shook his head slowly. "We reran the test twice after the initial flag. The results are conclusive, Maya. I am very sorry to be the one to tell you this." He pushed the file across the desk towards me. "The data is all here. Genetically speaking, Leo is your half-brother." I couldn't bring myself to open the file. I just stared at the beige folder as if it were a venomous snake. My brother, my little brother, Leo, we had the same nose, the same goofy smile when we were kids. We had a whole childhood of shared memories, shared scraped knees, shared secrets. How could we not be full siblings? My mind raced, trying to find a foothold in a world that had suddenly turned to quicksand. This information didn't just change a fact, it changed everything. It rewrote my entire life, my family, my own identity. I left the doctor's office in a daze. I don't remember the walk to the car. I don't remember the drive home. My body was on autopilot while my mind was a screaming chaos of denial and confusion. A mistake. It had to be a mistake. But Dr. Aris had been so certain. They reran the test. Twice. I got home and sat on my sofa, the doctor's words echoing in my ears. "He's your half-brother." I had to tell my parents. I had to see their faces, hear them deny it. I needed them to tell me the doctor was crazy, that the hospital had made a terrible error. I called my dad first. "I need you and Mom to come home," I said, my voice trembling. "I have to talk to you both. It's about the test results." "Is it bad news?" he asked, his voice already laced with weary resignation. "Just come home, Dad," I pleaded. "Please." They arrived an hour later, their faces etched with worry. My mother came in first, already on the defensive. "What is it, Maya? You sounded frantic. Is Leo worse?" Leo is the same, I said, my voice flat. I made them sit on the sofa. I stood before them, feeling like a prosecutor and a terrified child all at once. I couldn't ease into it. I had to just pull the pin and let it explode. I went to see Dr. Eris today. He told me I'm not a match for the transplant. My mother's face crumpled. "Oh no," she wailed, putting her head in her hands. I knew it. I had a feeling. What are we going to do now? My father just looked at the floor, his shoulders slumping. "That's not all," I said, my voice gaining a hard edge. I looked directly at my mother. He told me the reason I'm not a match is because we're not full siblings. He said the DNA test proved it. He said we have the same mother, but a different father. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence filled the room. I watched them, waiting for the explosion. The denial. The outrage. I expected my mother to leap to her feet, to accuse the doctor of incompetence, of slander. I expected my father to look shocked, to defend their marriage, their history. My father's face went pale, a sickly, ashen color. He didn't look shocked. He looked caught. He stared at my mother, his expression a mixture of fear and an old, deep-seated pain I had never seen before. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. And then my mother did something I will never forget as long as I live. She lifted her head from her hands. Her eyes were dry. There were no tears. A strange, tight smile stretched across her lips. And then she started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a low, cold, horrifying sound. It was the sound of a lock clicking open on a door I never knew existed. She just sat there, looking at me, her shoulders shaking with this silent, chilling laughter. The sound cut through my shock and went straight to the core of me. It was the most unnatural thing I had ever heard. My father flinched as if he'd been struck. He looked at her, his eyes wide with a kind of panicked disbelief. "Elena, stop," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Don't." But she didn't stop. The laugh grew a little louder, a brittle, sharp sound that filled the sterile quiet of our living room. It was the sound of a secret finally breaking free, but it wasn't a sound of relief. It was a sound of triumph. It was terrifying. In that moment, the doctor's words stopped being a possibility and became a horrifying, undeniable truth. The lab hadn't made a mistake. The mistake was my entire life. And my mother was laughing about it. My mind was a blank slate. I couldn't process the laugh. It didn't compute. A mother, faced with the revelation of a decades-old secret that redefines her family, a secret that impacts her dying son, laughs. What kind of person does that? The sound finally sputtered out, and she was left with a thin, cruel smile on her face. She looked from me to my father, a flicker of something dark and knowing in her eyes. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with a strange, airy nonchalance. "I guess the cat's out of the bag." I finally found my voice. It came out as a strangled whisper. "What are you talking about? What cat?" "Mom, the doctor said Dad isn't Leo's father. He said it, and you're laughing." She waved a dismissive hand as if I were a child throwing a tantrum over a broken toy. "Oh, doctors," she said with a sigh. "They're so dramatic. They make everything sound like such a big deal. It's just a little piece of paper, Maya. It doesn't change anything." "It changes everything," I shouted, the words tearing out of my throat. "How can you say that? Is it true? Dad, is it true?" I turned to my father, desperate. He was my anchor in this storm, the one person I thought was solid ground. But he wouldn't look at me. He just stared at his hands, his face a mess of shame and misery. His silence was an answer. It was a confession more powerful than any words. "Robert, don't you dare," my mother snapped, her voice suddenly sharp as glass. "Don't you dare let her upset you. We have enough to worry about with Leo. This is not important right now. Not important? My entire life had just been revealed as a lie, and it wasn't important? Not important? I repeated, my voice rising with hysteria. My brother is not my full brother. My father is not his father. You lied to us. To both of us. For our entire lives. How is that not important? Keep your voice down, she hissed, glancing towards the windows as if the neighbors might hear. You are causing a scene. You are being selfish. Your brother is in a hospital bed, fighting for his life. And you want to dredge up ancient history? What is wrong with you? The gaslighting was so immediate, so reflexive, it almost worked. For a split second, I felt a flash of guilt. Was I being selfish? But then the image of her laughing, that cold, triumphant sound, flashed in my mind. This wasn't about me being selfish. This was about her. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with her reaction. I'm not the one who's wrong here, I said, my voice shaking with a fury I had never felt before. You are. You lied. For 26 years. I looked at my father again. And you knew? You knew this whole time and you said nothing. My father finally looked up at me, his eyes swimming with tears. Maya, it was complicated, he stammered. Your mother, we decided it was for the best. For the best? I scoffed. For the best to live a lie? For Leo to not know who his real father is? For me to find out from a doctor in a hospital that my family is a sham? That is enough, my mother shrieked, jumping to her feet. I will not be spoken to this way in my own home. You have no idea what you're talking about, Maya. You are a child. You don't understand the decisions adults have to make. Then make me understand, I shot back. Tell me the truth, right now. Who is Leo's father? She just stared at me, her jaw tight, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. She wasn't going to tell me. She was going to stonewall, to manipulate, to turn this all back on me. I felt a wave of nausea. I was standing in a room with two strangers. The people I called Mom and Dad were gone, replaced by a liar and her hostage. I had to get out of there. I couldn't breathe the same air as them. I can't do this, I whispered, backing away towards the door. I can't even look at you right now. I turned and fled. I ran to my car and just drove with no destination in mind. I ended up at a park, sitting on a cold bench under a gray sky, the sound of my mother's laughter echoing in my head, a soundtrack to the wreckage of my world. I called Chloe. My hands were shaking so much I could barely dial her number. She answered on the first ring. Maya? What happened? Are you okay? No, I sobbed, the tears finally breaking free. It's true. It's all true. I told her everything. The doctor's words, my father's shame, and my mother's laugh. I recounted the entire conversation, the way she tried to twist it to make me the villain. Chloe was silent for a long moment after I finished. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm and clear, cutting through my chaotic grief. Okay, she said. Okay. Breathe. First of all, your feelings are valid. You are not selfish. You are not crazy. Your mother's reaction is beyond alarming. That's not a normal response, Maya. Not even for her. She just laughed, Chloe. I cried. Like it was a joke. Like my whole life was a punchline. I know, she said softly. And that's the part we need to focus on. The secret itself is a huge betrayal. But her laughing, that's something else. That's the real mystery here. Normal people don't do that. People who are ashamed don't do that. People who are scared of being caught don't do that. That was a power move. A power move. The phrase hit me hard. It was exactly what it felt like. She wasn't ashamed. She was pleased. Pleased that the secret was out on her terms. But why? What could she possibly gain from this? What do I do? I asked, feeling lost and powerless. I can't talk to them. I can't even be in the same room with them. You don't have to, Chloe said. Right now, you need to take care of yourself, and you need information. She's not going to give it to you, so you have to find it yourself. You said the doctor mentioned a file? Yes, I said, remembering the beige folder on his desk. He said the data was all there. Then that's your first step, Chloe said, her voice practical and grounding. You are legally entitled to your own medical information, and because these tests were done for a transplant for your brother, you have a right to see the results that pertain to that process. You need to go back to the hospital and get a full copy of that lab report. Don't ask your mother for permission. Don't even tell her you're doing it. Just go and get it. You need to see the proof in black and white. It's the first step to taking back control. She was right. My mother had controlled the narrative of our family for my entire life. Now, she was trying to control the narrative of its collapse. I couldn't let her. I needed facts. I needed evidence. I needed something solid to hold on to in this freefall. The lab report was the first piece of solid ground I could see. The next morning, I drove back to the hospital. I avoided the main entrance and went to the medical records department, a small, quiet office in the basement. I was a bundle of nerves, convinced my mother would somehow know what I was doing and would materialize to stop me. I filled out the request form, my hand shaking slightly as I wrote down my name and the date of the test. The clerk was a kind-faced woman who didn't ask any questions. She just stamped my form and said it would take a few hours to process. As I was leaving, my phone rang. It was my mother. My heart hammered against my ribs. I almost didn't answer, but I knew that would only make things worse. I took a deep breath and swiped to accept the call. "Hello," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Maya, where are you?" she asked, her tone deceptively sweet. "I was hoping you would come to the hospital. Leo was asking for you." The manipulation was so blatant it was almost insulting. "I have to work, Mom," I lied. "Work?" she said, her voice hardening. "Your brother is sick and you're worried about work? I really think you need to get your priorities straight. After your little outburst yesterday, the least you could do is show up and support your family." "My outburst?" I repeated, incredulous. "You think I was the one who had an outburst?" "You were hysterical," she said coolly. "You upset your father terribly. He's a mess. You need to come here and apologize to him." Apologize to him? For what? For reacting to the news that he'd been lying to me for my entire life? The audacity was breathtaking. "I'm not apologizing for anything," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "And I don't think I'll be coming to the hospital today. I need some space." "Space?" she scoffed. "What you need is to stop being so dramatic and start thinking about someone other than yourself. This family is in crisis, and you are making it worse. You are tearing us apart." That was it. That was the line. "I am tearing us apart?" "No, Mom," I said, my voice cold as ice. "You tore this family apart 26 years ago. I'm just the one who found the pieces. Don't call me again until you're ready to tell me the truth." I hung up before she could respond. My hand was trembling, but I felt a surge of something new. Not just anger, but resolve. She was not going to win. She was not going to make me the bad guy. A few hours later, I got a call from the records department. The report was ready. I went back and picked up a thick manila envelope. I didn't open it in the hospital. I took it to my car and sat there for a long time, just holding it. This was it. The proof. I finally tore open the seal and pulled out the papers. It was a dense collection of charts and numbers, most of which I didn't understand. But there was a summary page at the front, written in plain English. It said exactly what Dr. Aris had told me. Patient Maya, last name, and patient Leo, last name, share a maternal haplotype, consistent with a mother-child relationship for both with the same mother. However, they do not share a paternal haplotype. The probability of them being full siblings is 0.0%. The probability of them being half-siblings sharing a common mother is 99.99%. 0%. Seeing it in print, in stark, clinical black and white, made it brutally real. There was no more room for doubt, no more hope for a lab error. This was a fact. My father was not Leo's father. I folded the papers carefully and put them back in the envelope. This was my first piece of leverage, my first piece of the truth. My mother continued her campaign of emotional warfare. She didn't call me again directly, but she started working through other people. My Aunt Sarah, my dad's sister, called me that evening. "Maya, honey," she began, her voice full of concern. "Your mother called me. She's so worried about you. She said you're not taking the news about the transplant well." "The news about the transplant is not the issue, Aunt Sarah," I said tiredly. "There's more to it. She said you had some wild idea that Leo isn't your full brother," she continued, lowering her voice. "She says you're under a lot of stress and you're not thinking clearly. Honey, you know your mother. She can be dramatic. But she wouldn't lie about something like that." "Oh, but she would. She had." "It's not a wild idea," I said, my voice firm. "I have the DNA report from the hospital. It's true." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "What?" she finally whispered. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious," I said. I felt a small, grim satisfaction in cracking the narrative my mother was trying to build. Mom and Dad have been lying to everyone for 26 years. I didn't give her any more details. I just let that fact sit there. She didn't know what to say. She mumbled something about needing to process this and hung up. One by one, I was going to dismantle my mother's web of lies. My next step was to figure out the why. Not just why she had an affair, but why she laughed. Chloe's words echoed in my head. It was a power move. What power did this secret give her? I started thinking about the past, about my childhood. My mother had always treated Leo and me differently. She doted on him, but in a way that felt possessive. She was his champion, his defender. With me, she was more critical, more demanding. I was Robert's daughter. She said it all the time. "You're so serious, just like your father. You have your father's eyes." It was never a compliment. It was an accusation. I realize now that she saw me as his and Leo as hers. Our family wasn't a unit of 4. It was 2 separate camps living under one roof. My father and me, and my mother and Leo. And my father, he adored me, but there was always a sadness in his eyes, a distance I could never cross. He poured all his fatherly affection into me because he couldn't give it authentically to Leo. He was playing a part. The guilt must have been eating him alive for decades. This new understanding was horrifying, but it also made a certain kind of sense. It explained the tension, the unspoken rules, the strange emotional currents that had always run through our house. I decided it was time to dig deeper. I went to my parents' house when I knew they would be at the hospital. I still had a key. Letting myself into the silent house felt like a transgression. I was an intruder in my own childhood home. I went straight to my father's study. It was his sanctuary, the one place my mother's chaotic energy didn't seem to penetrate. In the bottom drawer of his desk, beneath old tax returns and bank statements, I found a small, locked metal box. I had seen it before, but never thought anything of it. I guessed it held important documents, like passports or birth certificates. I didn't have a key, but the lock was simple. A paperclip and a few minutes of jiggling it was all it took. Inside, there weren't any official documents. There was a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. The handwriting was my mother's. And there was a single photograph. It was of my mother, much younger, probably in her early 20s. She was standing next to a man I had never seen before. He was handsome, with a confident, easy smile. He had his arm around her, and they were both laughing. It was an intimate, happy photo. And in the background, I could just make out the corner of a building with a distinctive logo. A logo I recognized from a local country club. A place my parents had never been members of. A place for the wealthy. My heart pounded as I untied the ribbon and carefully unfolded the first letter. The date was from about a year before Leo was born. It was a love letter, a passionate, desperate love letter from my mother to this unknown man. It was full of plans for a future together, of stolen moments and secret meetings. "I can't bear being with Robert another day when all I can think about is you," she had written. "He suspects nothing. He is a fool." A fool. That's what she had called my father, the man who had raised her lover's son as his own. I felt a surge of protective rage on his behalf. I read through the other letters. They told a story of a passionate affair that ended abruptly. The last few letters were different. They were pleading. "Please don't do this. You can't just walk away. I have something to tell you. Something important." And then, the final letter dated just a few months before Leo's birth. It was angry, bitter. "You can't hide from this. He is your son. One day you will have to face what you've done." There it was. The whole sordid story hidden away in a metal box in my father's desk. He had kept them. He had kept this proof of his wife's betrayal for almost 30 years. Why? Was it a reminder? A weapon he never used? Or was it just a symbol of his own private prison? I took pictures of every single letter with my phone. I also took a picture of the photograph. This was more than just a family secret now. There was another person involved. A man who was Leo's biological father. A man who had walked away. My mother's laughter started to take on a new, more sinister meaning. This wasn't just about the past. It was about the present. It was about Leo's transplant. I left the house, my mind spinning. I had the what, and now I had the who. Or at least a face in a photograph. The question that still burned was the why. Why laugh now? What did she stand to gain from this chaos? I knew I couldn't figure it out on my own. There was only one person left who might know the truth behind my mother's twisted motivations. Her sister, my Aunt Carol. Aunt Carol was the family outcast. She and my mother had a famously difficult relationship. They were civil at holidays, but there was a palpable tension between them. Carol was blunt and cynical, the polar opposite of my mother's curated image of perfect suburban motherhood. My mother always said Carol was jealous of her. Now, I was starting to think Carol just saw through her. I called her. "Aunt Carol," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's Maya. I need to talk to you. It's important." She sounded surprised to hear from me. "Maya, is everything okay with Leo?" "He's the same," I said. "But something else has happened. Something big. Can I come over?" "Of course," she said, her voice softening with concern. "Come whenever you want." I drove to her small, cluttered house on the other side of town. It was filled with books and art and smelled like incense. It was a world away from my mother's sterile beige and white home. Carol made me a cup of tea and sat with me at her kitchen table. She looked at me with kind, intelligent eyes. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said gently. "Worse," I said. I took a deep breath and told her everything. I started with the doctor's appointment and the DNA results. I told her about my parents' reaction, my father's shame, and my mother's horrifying laughter. Carol listened without interrupting, her expression growing more and more grim. When I told her about the laugh, she closed her eyes and let out a long, slow breath. "I was afraid of this," she whispered. "I was always afraid it would come out in the worst possible way." "You knew?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "You knew Leo wasn't my dad's son?" She nodded slowly. "I knew Elena was having an affair. She was reckless. She thought she was being clever, but she was just messy. I didn't know for sure that she got pregnant until after Leo was born." There was a look in Robert's eyes. A light had gone out. "And your mother?" She became unbearable. So smug, like she had gotten away with something monumental. "She told me it was a decision adults have to make," I said bitterly. Carol snorted. "A decision she forced on your father, you mean?" She gave him an ultimatum. Either he accept the baby as his own and they pretend nothing happened, or she would leave him and cause a massive scandal that would ruin his reputation. He was a young lawyer in a conservative firm back then. He was ambitious. And he loved you, Maya. You were just a toddler. He didn't want to lose you. So he made a deal with the devil. He agreed to raise Leo. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't a mutual decision. It was blackmail. My father had been her prisoner for 30 years. But the laugh, Carol, I said, leaning forward. I can't get past the laugh. It wasn't relief, it was ugly. It was triumphant. Chloe, my friend, she said it was a power move. What does that mean? What power does she get from this? Carol stared into her teacup for a long moment. Your mother thrives on control, Maya. Her entire life is about managing perceptions, controlling the narrative. For years, this secret was her ultimate source of control over your father. It kept him tethered to her. But it was also a source of shame. She had to hide it. She resented Leo for being a constant reminder of the man who rejected her, and she resented you for being Robert's real child, the one who tied him to her legitimately. That makes sense, I said. She always treated us differently. Exactly, Carol continued. But now the situation has changed. Leo is sick, he needs something, and the secret is out. In her twisted mind, this is not a disaster. It's an opportunity. An opportunity for what? I asked, a cold dread creeping up my spine. Carol looked me straight in the eye. To finally get what she's always wanted from the man who walked away. Not his love, his money. The room went cold. I thought back to the letters, to the photo of the handsome, smiling man at the country club. The wealthy man. The biological father. I breathed. Yes, Carol said, her voice low. She's not laughing because the secret is out. She's laughing because you are not a donor match. Your father won't be a match either, I guarantee it. She needs Leo to be completely dependent on an outside donor, because she has already found one. I felt sick. Who? She's going to contact the biological father, Carol explained. Her words coming out in a rush. She's going to go to him and say, our son is dying. He needs a kidney. And if you don't want your perfect life and your perfect family to know you have an illegitimate child, you are going to pay. You are going to pay for the best doctors, the best care, and you are going to pay me for my silence. The transplant isn't a medical crisis for her, Maya. It's a business negotiation. It's the ultimate leverage she's been waiting 30 years to use. I stared at her, my mind reeling. My own mother was using her dying son as a pawn in a decades-old game of revenge and extortion. She was willing to risk Leo's life on the chance of a big payday. The cruelty of it, the sheer monstrousness of it, was beyond anything I could have imagined. Her laughter wasn't triumph over the past. It was the giddy, excited sound of a predator who had just cornered her prey. And the prey was Leo. She would let him die, I whispered, horrified. If this man says no, she would let Leo die rather than lose her leverage. I don't know if she'd let him die, Carol said, her face pale. But she would push it to the absolute limit. She would gamble with his life. Yes, I believe she would. I showed Carol the pictures I had taken on my phone, the letters, the photograph. She looked at the man's face in the photo, and her own face hardened. Daniel Harrison, she said, her voice full of contempt. Of course, it had to be him. You know him? I asked. I know of him, she corrected. Everyone in this town knows of him. His family practically owns the North Side. Real estate, development. He's a big deal. Presents himself as a pillar of the community, a family man. He's married to a woman from another wealthy family. It's all very pristine and perfect on the surface. Daniel Harrison. The name felt like a key. I had a name. I had a face. And I had a motive. My mother wasn't just a liar. She was a monster. And I was the only one who could stop her. My resolve hardened from a flickering flame into a steel rod. This was no longer just about uncovering a family secret. This was about saving my brother's life from our own mother. What do I do? I asked Carol, my voice no longer shaking. It was cold and steady. You have to be smart, Maya, she warned. She is dangerous when she's cornered. She will try to destroy you. She will paint you as crazy, as vindictive, as a liar. She will use every tool in her arsenal to discredit you before you can expose her. I know, I said. She's already started. She's telling the family I'm having a breakdown. Then you need more than just those old letters, Carol said. You need proof of what she's doing now. You need to prove she's trying to contact him. You need to prove the extortion plot. How could I possibly prove that? I couldn't hack her emails or tap her phone. But then an idea began to form in my mind. A risky, terrible idea. I didn't have to prove what she was doing. I just had to get to Daniel Harrison first. I had to warn him. I had to take away her leverage before she even had a chance to use it. I spent the next 2 days in a blur of activity. With Chloe's help, I did a deep dive into Daniel Harrison. He was exactly who Carol said he was. Chairman of Harrison Holdings, a multi-million-dollar real estate firm. He sat on the board of 3 different charities. His wife, Catherine, was a society figure. They had 2 grown children, a son and a daughter, both in their late 20s. His public image was flawless. A man like that would have everything to lose from a scandal involving an illegitimate son. My mother had chosen her target well. I found his office address, his work phone number, even the name of his executive assistant. I was building a plan, piece by piece. My first move was to test the waters with my father. I needed to know exactly where he stood. Was he a willing participant in this, or was he just a terrified bystander? I called him and asked him to meet me for coffee. He agreed immediately, his voice sounding small and relieved. We met at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. He looked terrible. He had aged 10 years in 2 days. His eyes were red-rimmed and he couldn't stop fidgeting with his napkin. Maya, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I am so sorry. You have every right to hate me. I don't hate you, Dad, I said, and it was the truth. I was angry, but mostly I just felt an overwhelming pity for him. I just want to understand. Why did you go along with it for all these years? He told me the story, his voice cracking. It was just as Carol had described. The affair, the pregnancy, the ultimatum. She told me if I left, she would make sure I never saw you again, he said, his eyes pleading with me to understand. You were my whole world, Maya. I couldn't lose you. I thought I could do it. I thought I could be a father to him. I tried. God, I tried. But every time I looked at him, I saw him, the man she chose over me. And I saw her, getting away with it. It was like a poison in our house. I just learned to live with it. Did you know she was planning to use this to get money from his biological father? I asked, cutting to the chase. His head snapped up. He looked genuinely shocked. What? No, what are you talking about? Money? She's not looking for a donor, Dad, I explained calmly. She's planning to extort Daniel Harrison. She wants a payout. That's why she laughed when I wasn't a match. It cleared the way for her plan. The color drained from his face. He stared at me, his mouth hanging open. No, he whispered. She wouldn't. Not even Elena would do that. Risk Leo's life for money? No. She would, I said firmly. And she is. She's isolating me, telling everyone I'm crazy, so no one will believe me when I try to stop her. She's counting on you to be too scared to stand up to her. Are you, Dad? Are you still too scared? He looked down at his hands, at the napkin he had shredded into a pile of white fluff. He was silent for a long time. I could see the war raging inside him. A lifetime of fear and submission versus the horrifying truth of what his wife had become. What are you going to do? He finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. He didn't deny it anymore. He believed me. I'm going to stop her, I said. But I need to know if you're with me. Are you going to keep protecting her, or are you going to help me protect Leo? He looked up, and for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of the man he used to be, a flicker of strength. I'm with you, he said, his voice gaining a sliver of conviction. Whatever it takes. I'm done being her puppet. That was all I needed. I now had one ally on the inside. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next part of the plan was the most dangerous. I had to contact Daniel Harrison. I couldn't just call his office. His assistant would screen the call, and a message like, "Your secret son needs a kidney," would never get through. I needed a way to get to him directly. Chloe, ever the pragmatist, came up with the solution. He's a creature of habit, she said, scrolling through news articles and society pages on her laptop. He has lunch at the same restaurant every Thursday, the Oak Room, very exclusive. You can't just walk in. So, how do I get to him? I asked. You don't, she said with a small smile. You get to his car. He has a private driver. The driver waits in a specific spot in the parking garage every day. If you can get to the driver, you can get a message to Harrison. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. The next Thursday, I drove to the ridiculously expensive parking garage next to the Oak Room. I felt completely out of place in my sensible sedan, parked between a Maserati and a Bentley. I found the spot Chloe had described, a reserved space near the private elevator. I waited. For almost an hour, I sat in my car, my heart pounding, feeling like a spy in a bad movie. Just after 1 o'clock, a sleek black town car pulled into the spot. A man in a professional driver's uniform got out and leaned against the car, scrolling through his phone. This was my chance. I took a deep breath, got out of my car, and walked towards him. "Excuse me," I said, my voice much steadier than I felt. "Are you Mr. Harrison's driver?" He looked up, his expression wary. "Who's asking?" "My name is Maya," I said. "I have an urgent and confidential message for him. It's a family matter." I had an envelope in my hand. Inside was a single piece of paper. On it, I had written just 3 things: Leo's name, the name of the hospital, and my phone number. I had also included a copy of the photograph of him and my mother. The driver looked from me to the envelope, his suspicion clear. He doesn't accept unsolicited messages. "I understand," I said, keeping my voice calm and respectful. "But please just give him this. Tell him it's about Elena. Tell him it's about her son. He'll understand." The mention of my mother's name made him pause. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. He knew the name. My mother or her memory was not entirely unknown in this man's world. He hesitated for a moment, then took the envelope from my hand. "I'll see that he gets it," he said, his tone noncommittal. "That's all I can promise." I thanked him and walked away, my legs feeling like jelly. I had done it. I had fired the first shot. Now all I could do was wait and see if it hit its mark. The waiting was the worst part. Every minute felt like an hour. I went to visit Leo that afternoon. My mother was there, holding court with a distant cousin. She shot me a look of pure venom when I walked in. But she kept up her performance of the grieving matriarch for her audience. "Maya, darling," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We were just talking about organizing a little get-together, a prayer circle maybe, to rally some positive energy for our Leo." A prayer circle. She wanted to gather the family so she could solidify her role as the suffering saint, further isolating me. The hypocrisy was nauseating. "That sounds lovely, Mom," I said, my voice equally false. I walked over to Leo's bed and took his hand. He was sleeping. He looked so fragile. The sight of him strengthened my resolve. I was doing the right thing. I sat with him for a while, just watching him breathe. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. My heart leaped. I stepped out into the hallway to answer it. "Hello? Is this Maya?" a man's voice asked. It was a deep, powerful voice, a voice used to being in charge. "Yes," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. This is Daniel Harrison, the voice said. I believe you have something of mine. He wasn't talking about the photograph. He was talking about Leo. My plan had worked. He had called. I think we need to talk, I said. I agree, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I don't know what kind of game you're playing or what Elena has put you up to, but I don't appreciate being ambushed. This isn't a game, I said, my voice firm. And my mother doesn't know I'm contacting you. In fact, I'm trying to stop her from doing the same thing. Your son is dying, Mr. Harrison. He needs a kidney. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. My son, he repeated, the words sounding foreign and strange. Yes, your son, I said. Leo. He's 26 years old. He has renal failure. He's at University Hospital. My mother, Elena, knows this, and she is planning to use it against you. She's not looking for a donor. She's looking for a payday. She was going to contact you and demand a fortune in exchange for her silence, using Leo's life as a bargaining chip. Silence. For a long, tense moment, the only sound was the distant beep of a hospital machine down the hall. I had laid all my cards on the table. I had no idea how he would react. He could hang up. He could accuse me of being the blackmailer. He could threaten me with lawyers. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. The anger was gone, replaced by something that sounded like shock. Is this true? He asked. He's sick? He's very sick, I said quietly. He doesn't have much time. I got tested to be a donor, but I wasn't a match. That's how I found out the truth. That's how I found out about you. Elena. He breathed, and the name was a curse. I should have known she wouldn't just disappear. I paid her for years to stay away, a generous amount. I thought she was settled. So Aunt Carol was right. He had been paying her. My mother had been taking money from this man for decades, all while living under my father's roof, letting him raise her son. The depth of her deception was bottomless. The money has either run out or it's not enough anymore, I said. This is her big play, the grand finale. But it's not about the money for me, Mr. Harrison. I don't want anything from you. I just want to save my brother. He is an innocent person in all of this. He doesn't deserve to be a pawn in her game. Where are you? He asked abruptly. I'm at the hospital now, I said. Don't move, he commanded. I'm on my way. He hung up. I stood in the hallway, my phone still pressed to my ear, my mind racing. He was coming here. I was about to meet my brother's biological father, a man who was a complete stranger, yet who held the key to Leo's survival. I felt a strange mix of terror and hope. This was it, the point of no return. I went back into Leo's room. My mother and the cousin were gone. I sat by Leo's bed, holding his hand, and waited. About 30 minutes later, a man appeared in the doorway. He was older than in the photograph, his hair now gray at the temples, but there was no mistaking him. It was Daniel Harrison. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, but his face was pale, his confident demeanor gone. He looked like a man who had just had the wind knocked out of him. He looked at me, then his eyes moved to Leo, lying in the bed. He took a hesitant step into the room, his gaze fixed on the son he had never met. I could see a storm of emotions on his face. Shock, guilt, fear. He walked slowly to the other side of the bed and looked down at Leo. He reached out a hand as if to touch him, but then pulled it back. He started, his voice rough. He looks like my father. He has your smile, I said quietly. It was true. Seeing them in the same room, the resemblance was undeniable. He finally tore his eyes away from Leo and looked at me. You're telling me the truth, he said. It wasn't a question. She was going to blackmail me. Yes, I said. She was waiting for the right moment, the moment you would be most vulnerable, the moment he was sickest. He shook his head, a look of profound disgust on his face. The cruelty. I never thought even she was capable of that. He looked back at Leo. What does he need? A kidney, you said? Yes, I said. He's on the transplant list, but it could take years. We need to find a living donor. Without a moment's hesitation, he said, I'll get tested. My children, too. We'll all get tested. Whatever it takes. I'll cover all the medical expenses. The best doctors, a private room, anything he needs. Tears of relief pricked my eyes. It was working. He wasn't fighting it. He was helping. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me, he said, his voice grim. This is my fault. I let this happen. I let her get away with it for too long. I should have done something 30 years ago. He looked at me, his eyes full of a new, hard resolve. And I'm going to end it now. She will not have any more power over this family. Or mine. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Clear my schedule for the rest of the week. He snapped into the phone. And get Dr. Peterson on the line. The geneticist. Tell him it's an emergency. He was a man of action. A man used to solving problems. And right now, we were his biggest problem. While he was arranging things, my mother walked back into the room. She stopped dead in the doorway, her eyes widening in shock as she saw Daniel Harrison standing by Leo's bed. Her face went through a rapid series of emotions. Shock, then fear, then a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. Her plan was in ruins. I had beaten her to it. Daniel, she breathed, her voice a venomous whisper. What are you doing here? He turned to face her, and his expression was glacial. Hello, Elena, he said, his voice dripping with ice. I came to see my son, the one you were about to use as a bargaining chip. Her eyes darted to me, and the hatred in them was so intense it was almost a physical force. You, she hissed. You did this. You went behind my back. I did what you were too cruel and selfish to do. I shot back, standing up to face her. I tried to save my brother's life. Something you were willing to gamble with for a check. You have no idea what you're talking about, she shrieked, her voice rising. You are a stupid, meddling little girl. You've ruined everything. Ruined what? Elena? Daniel Harrison cut in, his voice dangerously low. Ruined your extortion plot? Let me be very clear. The money is gone. It has been gone for years, and you will not get another cent from me. Ever. But that's the least of your problems right now. My father appeared in the doorway behind my mother, drawn by the shouting. He looked at the scene. Me, my mother, and this powerful stranger, and his face hardened. He walked past my mother and came to stand beside me. It was a small movement, but it was a declaration. He had chosen a side. He was with me. My mother looked at him, her face contorting with betrayal. Robert, you're taking her side? There are no sides, Elena, my father said, his voice shaking but firm. There's just right and wrong. And what you were planning to do to Leo? It's evil. The word hung in the air. Evil. It was the perfect word for it. My mother stared at us, her chest heaving. She was cornered. Her lies, her manipulations, her grand, monstrous plan. It had all come crashing down around her. She looked from my father to me, and then to Daniel Harrison, who was watching her with cold, unforgiving eyes. She was outnumbered. For the first time in her life, she had no control. She let out a sound that was half sob, half scream of frustration, and then she turned and fled, pushing past a nurse who was coming to investigate the noise. We were left in the sudden, ringing silence. Daniel Harrison took charge immediately. He spoke with Dr. Aris, explaining the situation in clipped, efficient terms. He arranged for himself and his 2 other children to be tested for compatibility that very day. He moved Leo to a private suite on a different floor, away from any potential interference from my mother. He was a force of nature, a whirlwind of money and influence. For the first time since Leo's diagnosis, I felt a flicker of real hope. We had a path forward. The next few days were a strange limbo. My father stayed with me at my apartment. He seemed broken, but also lighter, as if a 30-year burden had finally been lifted from his shoulders. We talked for hours, really talked for the first time in my life. He told me about his regrets, about the quiet misery of his marriage, about how his love for me was the one thing that kept him going. It was painful and raw, but it was honest. We were starting to build something new from the wreckage. My mother tried to retaliate. She sent me a barrage of furious, rambling text messages, accusing me of destroying the family, of poisoning my father against her, of being a jealous, hateful daughter. She called my aunts and cousins, feeding them a twisted version of the story where I was the villain, a greedy interloper who had brought in a stranger to tear their family apart. But it was too late. The truth was already out. My conversation with Aunt Sarah had laid the groundwork, and my father leaving her was the final confirmation. Her narrative was falling apart. No one was listening to her anymore. The most important call came 3 days later. It was from Daniel Harrison. "We have a match," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My daughter, Jessica. She's a perfect match. The doctors want to schedule the surgery for next week." I burst into tears, the relief so overwhelming it buckled my knees. "Thank you," I sobbed into the phone. "Thank you and your daughter. I don't know how to thank you." "You saved his life, Maya," he said quietly. "You're the one who should be thanked. You did what a real family member does. You put him first." The day of the surgery, the hospital waiting room was a strange tableau. On one side, there was me, my father, Chloe, and Aunt Carol. On the other, there was Daniel Harrison, his wife, Catherine, and their son, Michael. Catherine was elegant and reserved, her face a mask of polite concern. It was impossible to know what she was thinking. But Jessica, the donor, had been warm and kind when I met her. "He's my brother," she had said to me with a simple shrug. "Of course I'm going to help him." A new family was being forged in the crucible of this crisis. My mother was nowhere to be seen. She had been effectively barred from the floor. She had tried to show up earlier, but my father had met her at the elevator and told her in a quiet but unyielding voice that she was not welcome. Her presence would only cause stress for Leo. Her reign was officially over. The surgery was long, but it was a success. The doctors were optimistic. Leo's body was accepting the new kidney. When he was moved to recovery, we were allowed to see him, one at a time. I went in first. He was groggy and pale, but his eyes were clear. "Hey," he whispered, a faint smile on his lips. "Hey, yourself," I said, my voice choked with tears. I squeezed his hand. "You did it." "We did it," he corrected. I heard some crazy things happened while I was out of it." "We'll talk about it later," I said, "when you're stronger. All you need to do now is rest and get better." Over the next few weeks, as Leo recovered, the full story came out. I told him everything, gently and carefully. I told him about the DNA test, about Mom's laughter, about Dad's long-held secret. I told him about Daniel Harrison and his family. He listened quietly, his expression unreadable. When I was finished, he was silent for a long time. "So Dad isn't my dad," he said finally, testing the words. "He raised you," I said softly. "He loves you, that's real. But no, he's not your biological father." "And Mom," he said, his voice trailing off. He shook his head. "She was going to sell me?" The question was so blunt, so childlike, it broke my heart. "She made some very bad choices, Leo," I said, not wanting to be quite as brutal. "No," he said, his voice suddenly hard. "That's not a choice. That's monstrous. She was going to let me die for money." He looked at me, his eyes full of a new, cold clarity. "I don't want to see her, ever again." And he meant it. He refused her calls. He sent back her letters unopened. When she tried to show up at the hospital again, he had the nurses turn her away. Her last and most important piece of leverage, her control over her beloved son, was gone. She had overplayed her hand and lost everything. The aftermath settled into a new kind of normal. My father filed for divorce. He sold the house, the one that had been a prison for him for so long, and moved into a smaller apartment near me. He and I started to build a real relationship, one based on honesty instead of secrets. He started to smile again, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Leo's recovery was slow but steady. Daniel Harrison and his family were a constant presence. They were tentative at first, unsure of their roles, but their kindness was genuine. Daniel paid for everything, from the medical bills to a top-tier physical therapist for Leo. He set up a trust fund for him, not as a payoff, but as a way of trying to make up for lost time. He started to build a relationship with his son, one quiet conversation at a time. Leo was hesitant but open. He had lost a mother, but he had gained a father, a sister, and a brother. I saw my mother one last time. It was a few months later. I was leaving a grocery store and she was there, sitting in her car in the parking lot. She looked smaller, diminished. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled. Her makeup wasn't flawless. She looked like just another tired, middle-aged woman. She got out of her car when she saw me. "Maya," she said. Her voice was flat. "Mom," I replied, my tone equally neutral. "I hear he's doing well," she said, not using Leo's name. "He is," I said. "He's getting stronger every day." "And Robert?" she asked. "He's happy now, I suppose? With you? Now that you've destroyed our family?" I just looked at her. The old guilt, the old fear she used to be able to trigger with a single sentence. It wasn't there anymore. It was just gone. "You destroyed it, Mom," I said, my voice calm and steady. "You just didn't realize it until everyone else left the burning building." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, searching for a weapon that no longer worked. She had nothing. No leverage, no secrets, no power. She was just Elena. A woman who had made a series of terrible choices and was now living with the consequences. "I have to go," I said. I turned and walked to my car without looking back. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. She was still standing there, alone in the parking lot, watching me go. A year later, life was unrecognizably different and infinitely better. I was at a barbecue in Daniel Harrison's sprawling backyard. It was for Leo's one-year kidneyversary, as Jessica called it. Leo was at the grill, laughing with his new brother, Michael. He looked healthy and happy. My dad was there, talking with Daniel, the two fathers of one son, finding a strange, quiet peace with each other. Chloe was there, my rock through the whole ordeal. I stood on the patio, watching them all. This was my family now. A strange, complicated, patchwork family born from a terrible secret. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was honest. Leo caught my eye from across the lawn and gave me that old, goofy smile, the one I thought I might never see again. He raised his glass in a toast to me. I smiled back, a real, genuine smile. The ghost of my mother's laughter, the sound that had haunted me for so long, was finally silent. She had gambled with my brother's life and lost. I finally understood her laughter. It was the sound of a monster celebrating a victory that was never hers to claim. And in the end, her celebration had cost her everything and given us a chance to be free.